It was a fog-drenched night in October 1993, when the quiet of rural Oregon was shattered by an eerie discovery. A sheriff's cruiser sat idling on the side of County Road 19, its headlights piercing the thick mist, casting long shadows through the dense pine woods. The vehicle's engine purred steadily, an unnatural sound in a place where silence ruled after dark. Both front doors hung wide open as if abandoned mid-emergency. In the back seat, a 6-year-old boy lay curled beneath a worn sheriff's department blanket. Ben Teller, barefoot, dressed in fire truck pajamas, asleep, safe but alone. The farmer who stumbled upon the cruiser hesitated at first, suspecting a trap. Poachers were known to fake breakdowns, but when he shone his flashlight inside and caught sight of the sleeping child, his suspicion melted into dread. There was no blood, no shattered glass, no tire tracks leading away, no desperate radio call, just stillness and absence. Deputy Mark Teller and his wife, Detective Aaron Teller, were gone without a trace. The cruiser's dash cam had stopped recording at 10:42 p.m., the magnetic tape torn mid-reel, its innards frayed like something had been yanked free in a panic. Even the interior camera had been manually disabled. Only one of their service weapons was missing, Aaron's. The sheriff who arrived shortly after leaned into the vehicle, breath fogging in the cold air, and murmured to himself, "What the hell were you chasing out here?" Ben would grow up remembering only fragments, hazy impressions like dreams half recalled. The faint scent of his mother's shampoo still clinging to the passenger seat. His father's voice, steady but urgent, "Don't move. We'll be right back." And just before he drifted off, a figure in the rearview mirror. Not his parents, someone else, just standing there, watching, then gone. 3 decades passed. Ben Teller, now a criminology professor at Portland State, had buried the past beneath textbooks and office hours, until the day it clawed its way back. During a routine land survey just outside Timuc, Oregon, a construction crew unearthed something ancient, a decommissioned fallout shelter buried beneath 40 tons of soil. Inside, under a rusted drain grate, they found a sheriff's badge, Mark Teller's. And beside it, a photograph of young Ben taken after the night his parents vanished. The October wind cut like a blade that morning, howling through the pines as if it carried whispers from the past. Deputy Mason Coyle zipped his jacket tighter and stepped over cracked concrete slabs as he followed survey flags toward the newly exposed hillside. The land had once belonged to the Bureau of Civil Defense, abandoned in the 60s, forgotten by all but time. Leo Strickland, the backhoe operator who had made the discovery, was pale and jittery, wringing his gloved hands. "It wasn't on any map," he said. "I wasn't even digging here, just checking runoff lines. The ground gave out." The slab had split clean down the center, revealing the corroded steel hatch of an old shelter. Dust and rust clung to the walls. Inside, a broken cot, remnants of civil defense supplies, and a floor drain, beneath which something metallic glinted. Coyle radioed it in. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Coyle. I need a forensics team and cold case unit at my location. We've got something down here." Ben almost didn't answer the phone when it rang. The number was local but unfamiliar. He was halfway down a university hallway, already late for office hours. But instinct, or maybe something deeper, made him stop. "Mr. Teller, this is Lieutenant Sarah Canby from Timuc County Sheriff's Office. I'm calling in reference to your parents, Mark and Aaron Teller." He froze. Those names hadn't been spoken together in years. "Go on," he said, voice catching in his throat. A structure was uncovered. Inside, we found a badge registered to your father, and something else you'll want to see. I know you're not local. I'll be there in 2 hours. The drive back down to Timuc was drenched in silence, but his mind screamed. Every curve of the road brought back images. The cruiser, the open doors, the cold. He hadn't returned since that night. As the pine trees thickened around him, it felt like stepping back into a dream that had never ended. Ben parked near the sheriff's cars and stared down the flagged path. A coroner's van waited off to the side. A young officer greeted him at the tree line. "Lieutenant Canby is inside the tent. We've cataloged what we could. You're not required to ID anything, but there's something you need to see." Inside the staging tent, the air was thick with antiseptic and damp plastic. Lieutenant Canby stood tall, sleepless eyes behind a mask of professionalism. She gestured to a table covered in tagged evidence bags. "We found this," she said, lifting one. Inside the pouch was the badge. And something else. Something no one had expected. Something that might finally answer the question that haunted Ben's entire life, or tear open a wound that had never truly healed. Inside the sealed evidence pouch, a tarnished silver badge rested, dulled by time but unmistakably clear. It read, "Tillamook County Sheriff Number 712, M. Teller." Ben's knees buckled slightly, catching himself against the edge of the table. "My father never took that badge off," he whispered, "not even when he was off duty." Lieutenant Canby nodded, her tone gentle but resolute. "There's more." She carefully lifted a second pouch. Inside, it was a Polaroid photograph, its edges curled and yellowed with age. It showed a young boy in a small, warmly lit kitchen, standing in front of a birthday cake. The wallpaper behind him was patterned with faded green flowers on a mustard yellow background. The boy wore a party hat and looked startled, mid-blink, frozen in a moment of innocent joy. Ben stared at it for a long, silent beat. "That's me," he said, voice nearly inaudible. "That's my 6th birthday." His throat tightened. "That photo, it was never developed. The film was still in the camera." Canby exchanged a glance with a nearby crime tech. Ben's brows furrowed. "I've never seen that photo before, but I remember that day. I remember everything, the cake, the plates, even the way the oven broke and my dad had to bake it in the fire pit outside. He called it cowboy baking and said never again. My mom just laughed." "Mr. Teller," Canby said cautiously, "we believe the shelter was accessed sometime after the year 2000, maybe more than once. The soil analysis indicates recent disturbance." Ben's gaze snapped up. "You think someone's been using it?" "Possibly. The badge wasn't just dropped. It was deliberately placed. We found food wrappers dated from the early 2000s, a child's sneaker, at least 20 years old, and a journal. We're still processing it." Ben's breath caught. "A journal?" She nodded. "You're not permitted to read it yet, not until the chain of custody report is complete. But the first page was signed by someone named Aaron." His heart stopped. Aaron Teller, his mother. Ben's thoughts swirled with 1,000 questions and one single terrifying possibility, that she had survived, at least for a time. He stared at the badge again, then at the Polaroid, unable to shake the ghostly familiarity of it. That night, in his hotel room, he couldn't sleep. He sat cross-legged on the bed, the sealed pouch in his lap. His fingers traced the edges of the photo through the thin plastic, absorbing every imperfect detail. The sagging cabinet door, the lopsided cake, the autumn light filtering through the windows. His father had laughed when the cake came out burnt around the edges. His mother had joked about buying one next time. Someone had preserved that moment. Someone who should never have had access to it. Someone who might never have left. At 4:11 a.m., Ben shot upright, heart pounding. The family camera. It had vanished the same night his parents did. The Polaroid, his mother's old camera, was never found. She cherished it, documented everything. But that photo had never been printed. So who developed it? He grabbed his keys and left without hesitation. When he arrived at the excavation site, the morning fog had thickened into a heavy curtain, clinging to his skin. Under the harsh light of portable flood lamps, Canby stood with 2 detectives and a forensic tech typing into a laptop. "I know it's early," Ben said, stepping into the tent, "but I need to see the journal. Just the cover." She hesitated, then reached into a labeled evidence crate. From it, she retrieved a sealed bag containing a cloth-covered book. pale green with a faded gold stripe. The name etched on the front in blocky black letters. Aaron Teller. Ben's breath hitched. He knew that notebook. His mother had used it constantly, for grocery lists, sketches, thoughts, even case notes she wasn't supposed to share. It was a gift from his father on their 7th anniversary. She carried that notebook every day, he said, voice barely above a whisper. If it's real, then she lived. Canby's voice softened. Preliminary analysis dates the last entry to around 2007. Ben's legs gave, and he gripped the table. 14 years. She lived at least 14 more years after that night. Possibly longer, Canby added. There are several entries. Some are detailed, others look rushed or coded. One entry reads, Day 143. He won't let me see Mark, but he lets the boy visit now. He says we're safer here than out there. I don't believe him anymore. Ben stepped back, pulse racing. The boy? That wasn't me. Later that morning, Ben drove out to County Road 19. The fog had lifted slightly, but the oppressive silence remained. He found the overgrown turnout where the cruiser had once sat. Grass now claimed the gravel. Still, he knew exactly where it had been. Angled east, door open, a sleeping boy in the back. He crouched at the spot, eyes closed. He could hear it. The radio static, the rustling pines, his father's voice. We'll be right back. But they never came back. Ben rose slowly, turned toward the woods. If someone had been watching that night, they would have had a perfect view. He crossed the road, gravel crunching beneath his feet, stepped into the forest, ducked low-hanging limbs, and followed instinct. Roughly 200 yards in, he found a faint path, a hunter's trail. It dipped downhill, then veered sharply right. A rusted barbed wire fence sliced between 2 trees. Beyond it, the trail continued. Ben climbed over. 10 minutes later, buried in the underbrush, he found what remained of a hunting blind. The tarp had rotted. Leaves and moss swallowed most of it, but something beneath it caught his eye, a military-issue canteen. He didn't touch it. He just stared. MT, his father's initials, were scratched into the bottom. Ben stepped back and called Canby. Lieutenant, I found something. An old blind, a canteen with my dad's initials. About 15 minutes east of County Road 19, past an old fence line. Do not touch anything, she said firmly. Stay there, I'm coming. He hung up and stood silently, heart thudding. The trees closed in around him, heavy and still. Someone had watched from here. Someone had waited. Maybe they never left. Lieutenant Canby arrived in under 30 minutes, followed by 2 patrol units and a forensic team. The techs began photographing the area. Ben watched, arms crossed tightly, fighting the storm inside. How had his father's canteen ended up here? So close, so invisible, all these years. The answers felt closer now, but each new clue only led deeper into the woods, and deeper into the truth he was no longer sure he was ready to face. Lieutenant Canby ducked beneath the low-hanging limbs and stepped toward the remnants of the blind. Her gaze swept the forest floor, the brush, the rusted fence line stretching out behind it. This was hidden well, she murmured, crouching beside the canteen. Her voice carried the weight of a deeper realization. Too well for a hunting spot. No one hides gear like this unless they're watching something. Or someone. Ben nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the tree break ahead. Look through there. You get a clear line of sight straight to where the cruiser was. If someone had been here in '93, they could have watched the entire scene unfold without anyone noticing. Canby glanced back at him, her expression solemn. That means your parents. They might have never left this area. The word struck Ben like a blow to the gut. The idea that they had been taken, or worse, so close to where he had played as a child, filled him with a crawling unease. Every tree, every whispering pine needle now felt like a silent witness. One of the techs gingerly retrieved the canteen with tongs and sealed it inside a fresh evidence bag. Then a deputy emerged from higher up the ridge. "Found another trail," she called down. "Leads west, toward the back of the property. Looks like there's a clearing with a shed. Looks newer than the blind." Canby stood and turned to Ben. "We'll check it out. I need you to stay here with Officer Langston. I'll radio if we find anything." Ben's jaw tightened. "I want to come." Canby paused, weighing his words carefully. "This isn't just a case for you. It's personal, raw. That makes things complicated. If you see something familiar, you might interpret it differently." "I'm not asking to process anything," Ben said. I need to see what's out there." She studied him for a long moment. Then finally, she nodded. "Stay close. And don't touch anything." The trail wound into a narrow deer path, nearly invisible to the untrained eye. Roots coiled across the ground like sleeping snakes. The forest canopy thickened overhead, dimming the light until it felt like dusk, even though the sun had long since risen. Ben followed just behind Canby as they pushed through the underbrush. Then the trees parted. A steel shed emerged from the slope, 10 by 12 feet, its corrugated siding streaked with rust. It looked oddly intact, save for the lock on the door. New, shiny, and unsettling. One of the officers raised his weapon. Canby stepped forward, hand on her own sidearm. "We're going in," she said, motioning for bolt cutters. The padlock snapped with a sharp metallic crack. Inside it was dark and silent. The beams from their flashlights swept across bare concrete, wooden shelves, and a makeshift table. No insulation, no sign of recent living. But what made Ben's blood run cold was the back wall, a cork board, warped by moisture but still holding, covered in photographs. Every single one was of him. Ben as a teenager riding his bike outside his grandmother's house. Ben in college, blurry in the background near a lecture hall. Ben 3 years ago, stepping out of a courthouse. All taken from a distance. None taken with his knowledge. His heart thudded as the world narrowed to the space in front of him. Canby stepped up beside him, her voice low. "This goes beyond your parents. Someone's been tracking you for decades." Ben stepped back, struggling to steady his breathing. Then, something caught his eye. A cracked leather photo album tucked behind a row of labeled film canisters. He pulled it out with gloved hands. Inside were more photos from the early 90s. The birthday cake, the same wallpaper, the same party. But new faces appeared. A girl with long dark hair standing beside Aaron Teller in what looked like a makeshift basement room. A narrow bed in the corner. A man's shadow just barely visible at the frame's edge. More children. None of them Ben. Ben's voice broke. This wasn't just surveillance. Someone kept them. Maybe others. Canby turned the pages with a deepening frown. At the very back of the album, taped to the inside cover, was a note written in shaky, childlike handwriting. "The man in the mask says, 'We're not allowed to leave yet, but one day Mommy said the door will open.'" Ben closed the book gently. His father's badge, his mother's journal. This album, hidden in the woods, filled with the faces of strangers and ghosts. That afternoon at the station, the pieces finally felt too large for one county to carry. Canby called in the federal task force. The shelter, the shed, the photos, the journal, the children. It had become something darker, something older. Ben sat silently in the conference room, blinds drawn tight. The photo of himself at 6 still lay on the table in front of him. Unmoved, untouched. A knock. Canby entered, her coat dusted in dirt. Her eyes met his. "We've confirmed something else," she said, placing a document down. "The fingerprint analysis on the badge came back. It wasn't your father's, but it does belong to someone in the system." Ben sat forward. "Who?" Her voice was tight. "Curtis Lyle, former civil defense maintenance worker, went off the grid in 2002, never flagged in your parents' case, but he should have been." Ben stood abruptly. "Where is he now?" Canby exhaled. That's the problem. Last known address was 40 miles east. After that, nothing. He just disappeared. Ben turned slowly to the Polaroid, his 6-year-old self frozen mid-smile. Someone had kept that moment, framed it, watched it, waited. Curtis Lyle's personnel file was shockingly thin. A few yellowing pages, a grainy black-and-white ID photo from 1981, notes on basic facility duties, and a retirement request dated May 1993, just 5 months before the tellers vanished. The signature was slanted and rushed. The form checked for medical leave. No forwarding address, no exit interview, just gone. Canby flipped open a map of old civil defense sites. He worked these facilities when they were still active. He had keys, clearance, full access. Many were never fully decommissioned. Paperwork's a mess. Ben pressed his fingers to his temple. And no one thought to look at him before now? He wasn't flagged, Canby said. He retired before the disappearances. Lived alone, no record. He just faded. Until now. Ben's jaw tensed. And now his fingerprint is on my father's badge. We're digging into utilities, deeds, anything that might show where he went, Canby said. But if he wanted to stay hidden, he had decades to learn how. Ben's breath caught again. What if Curtis Lyle had been the last person to see his parents alive? And the other children in the album? Canby's tone darkened. We're running facial recognition. 2 already match missing persons from Oregon between 1990 and 1995. Ben swallowed. So it wasn't just my family? No, she said. It wasn't. That night, Ben stood outside his childhood home. The porch light flickered faintly. The cedar tree still leaned over the driveway, heavy with memories. The house had changed owners, but the bones were the same. The current tenant, a middle-aged woman with gentle eyes and only the faintest recollection of the teller case, had handed him the key. 10 minutes, she said. Take all the time you need. Inside, the floorboards still creaked beneath his steps, just like they used to. The walls had been painted over, but the scent of old pine wood still lingered in the bones of the house, like a quiet memory refusing to fade. Ben stepped slowly through the hallway, past the place where his mother's framed degrees had once hung, into the kitchen, the very heart of his childhood. He paused by the counter where the birthday cake had once sat, then moved to the precise angle where the Polaroid had been taken. Standing in the same spot his 6-year-old self had once occupied, he let the silence wrap around him. There was the drawer where his mother used to keep the camera, the cupboard that held his father's emergency flashlight, the corner of the table where he had perched as a boy, legs swinging beneath the chair, pretending to be a detective like his mom. His eyes stung. Everything was still here, and yet none of it was. Only echoes. He opened the drawer. It was empty now, save for a cracked measuring tape and a broken corkscrew. The camera was gone. But as he knelt to close it, something caught his eye. Wedged behind the drawer's back track was a roll of film, sealed in old Kodak packaging. His heart slammed against his ribs. He pulled it out slowly, reverently. Faded but intact. Labeled in his mother's unmistakable handwriting, October for Mark. His fingers trembled. She had hidden it or forgotten it. Either way, it had survived. He tucked it into his coat pocket and locked the door behind him. Back in town, he found an old camera shop on 8th and Alder, nestled between a pawn shop and a vape store. The neon sign read, Allie's Camera and Memories, in flickering pink letters. The place smelled of chemical toner and time. The man behind the counter looked to be in his 60s, with tufts of white hair sprouting from the sides like stubborn wings. He squinted at the roll. You're lucky, he said. They stopped making this in '04, but I've still got chemicals that'll treat it gentle. Can you do it today? Ben asked. The man nodded slowly. Give me a few hours. If it's been stored right, you'll get something. If not, well, film dies quiet. Ben nodded. Do your best. He left his number and walked out into the mist. At 6:52 p.m., his phone rang. "You'll want to see this in person," the voice said. Ben was back at the shop within 5 minutes. The prints were still drying. 24 photographs. Some faded to rust orange, others murky, but a few were startlingly clear. His mother, Erin, in uniform beside Mark, both laughing, captured in a rare moment of joy. Another, Erin at her desk, hunched over a map. Then the interior of the cruiser, the back seat, the blanket, a sleeping boy, him, photographed from outside the open door. And then the one that stopped his breath, a man's face, blurred at the edges as if in motion but distinct. Receding hairline, glasses, mid-40s, eyes staring directly into the camera. Smiling, not surprised, not caught off guard. Smiling. Ben turned to the shop owner. "You didn't crop these?" "Print it as is," the man said. Ben snapped a photo of the image with his phone. "I need to get this to the sheriff's office now." By the time Canby reviewed the image, facial recognition was already running. The man in the photo had never been arrested, but had been flagged in a 2005 visitor log at a state psychiatric facility. The name he'd used, Garrett Shane. He had visited Curtis Lyle. "That name was an alias," Canby said. "His real name is Garrett Lewis K.S. Changed it in 1992. Identity theft, no fingerprints, no record, nothing real. But that's him." "And he was watching my family," Ben said, rage simmering beneath his voice. "Taking photos, maybe even inside our house. He's tied to Lyle. That makes him central. If he's still out there, we'll find him," Canby said. But even as she said it, a shadow crossed her face. Garrett K.S. had lived off the radar for decades, his trail littered with badges, buried film, sealed shelters. He wasn't just elusive. He was deliberate, calculated, a predator who didn't make mistakes. The task force pinned his photo to the center of their board the next morning. Garrett Lewis K.S., written in bold red across the top. Beneath, a list, 3 known addresses, 6 aliases, and 1 haunting detail. Visitor, Curtis Lyle, Tamuk Mental Health Facility, March 2005. He never used his real name, Canby told the team. But he visited Lyle twice, unscheduled. Used a forged ID and a defunct access badge. The facility didn't catch it until years later. "What was Lyle institutionalized for?" someone asked. Canby flipped to the next slide. "Paranoia. He claimed people were watching him, listening through the walls. Said he was kept underground for weeks at a time, claimed he worked black sites for the government." Ben sat at the back of the room, jaw clenched. "Lyle was a puppet," he muttered, "and K.S. was pulling the strings." Canby nodded. "We believe K.S. used Lyle's civil defense access to move through the county undetected, maybe even retrofitted one of the fallout shelters for long-term captivity." "Then this goes beyond your parents," someone added. "He could have been active for decades." Ben stood. "He took my family. He watched me grow up. Now it's our turn. Let's watch him." That afternoon, Ben returned to the shed. Against Canby's warning. He had to be there, alone. The corkboard was gone. Shelves cleared, evidence sealed and taken. But the space still thrummed with something unseen. He ran his flashlight slowly across the floor. A scratch, a smudge, a boot print. Then, he spotted it. A warped floorboard, a metal hatch beneath. His pulse spiked. He knelt, pried it open. A shaft of stairs led into shadow. Ben descended. The air smelled of mildew and concrete rot. His flashlight caught glimpses, reinforced walls, rusted bracing. Halfway down, a phrase scratched into the wall. He says, "We'll be part of the new family." Ben's breath shook. He reached a steel door. No handle, just a slot bolted shut from the other side. A cell. Or a tomb. He backed out carefully. Called Canby the second he reached daylight. Over the next 72 hours, the chamber was processed. Wires in the walls, moldy bedding, stained clothing, a wooden chair bolted to the floor, and in the corner, a crayon drawing, A square room, one door, one window, stick figures, woman, child, a tall figure with black marks for a face. Ben stared at it. The boy wasn't him. A retired psych nurse identified the art. "This is Karen's work," she said. "He was suspected of squatting in abandoned sites. He was manipulative, charismatic, obsessed with isolation." "Was he ever institutionalized?" Ben asked. "Number too careful, too charming. But behind closed doors, he believed modern society corrupted innocence, thought the only way to save the world was raising children underground." Ben's throat tightened. He remembered the journal. "He won't let me see Mark, but he lets the boy visit now." It wasn't a fantasy. It was real. The next lead didn't come from evidence or forensics. It came from an intern named Emma at the State Archives, who stumbled on a misplaced box of land records from 1991, and inside was a name no one had spoken in over 30 years. It was a rural land purchase west of Nahal Bay State Park, discreet and easily overlooked. The buyer? GLKS. But what truly stood out wasn't what the file included. It was what was missing. The property had no structure listed, no utility hookups, no recorded inspections. It was labeled for recreational use only. No permits, no visitor logs, no signs of life. But satellite imagery from 2006 contradicted all of it. A small structure appeared, a bunker or shed. By 2009, it was gone. Not dismantled, disappeared, hidden beneath carefully planted trees and soil manipulation. Enough to trick aerial surveillance. The FBI greenlit a search. Canby turned to Ben. "You want to come?" He didn't hesitate. They reached the edge of the property just as dusk bled through the trees. No paved roads, only forest. The search team spread out. Ben followed, flashlight beams sweeping the underbrush. Then came the call. Found something. It was bunker style, mostly underground. Overgrown, hidden beneath decades of moss and decay. The steel door was welded shut. No sounds from inside. An hour later, they breached it. Inside, it was hollow, cleared, empty, but the walls, not tagged, not vandalized, painted, covered from floor to ceiling in hundreds of black ink repetitions. "We are the saved." She never learned. He was the first. She was the last. And at the center of the room, scrawled in red, "He's not your father." Ben collapsed to his knees. The words didn't just echo, they thundered. And as the others moved around him, bagging evidence, photographing everything, Ben sat still, drowning in a possibility he had buried for 31 years. What if the man who raised him wasn't Mark Teller? What if the man who whispered, "We'll be right back," and kissed him goodnight was Carnes? What if Mark Teller had died that night, and the monster wore his face? Ben didn't speak for the rest of the evening. Not in the ride back. Not when Canby gently asked if he was all right. Not when the task force met again and strung new red threads between evidence, suspects, victims. He just stared at the printout of the wall. "He's not your father." At 2:13 a.m., he drove to a clinic on the edge of town, not seeking closure, seeking proof. A technician greeted him with a puzzled look. "You want a rapid DNA test?" Ben nodded. "I need it compared to the archived sample of Mark Teller. There's a law enforcement file. I'll submit the request code." The tech blinked. "You're not sure he was your biological father?" Ben's voice was almost a whisper. "I need to know if I was his son, or a planted decoy." The tech said nothing more, just handed him the swab. Ben didn't sleep while waiting. Not that night. Not the one after. He walked. Saturday. Tried to remember his father's voice, the cadence of his footsteps, the warmth of his laugh. But memory is a fragile thing. All he could remember was the feeling, safe, warm, like a blanket pulled over his shoulders in the dark. Was it real? The results came 2 days later. He was sitting in the park across from the station, hands wrapped around a coffee that had long gone cold. His phone rang. Ben answered, didn't speak. "The samples don't match," the technician said. The man listed as Mark Teller was not your biological father. Ben closed his eyes. There was no gasp, no scream, just a slow exhale. Truth confirmed, a truth that had already begun to calcify inside him. "Thank you," he said. And with that, the silence around him changed. Not grief, something heavier, a lineage severed, a history dismantled. He wasn't a deputy's son. He was a child left in a car, a message, a seed in someone else's design. Later that night, Canby spotted him in the station's garage, sitting beside the old red Cadillac door from the junkyard. One hand rested on the frame like he was listening. "You okay?" she asked. He didn't look up. I used to remember his voice. I'd hear it in dreams. "Ben, shoes off. Mom's making chili." He paused. "Now, I can't remember how it sounded. Not really. Just how it felt." Canby crouched beside him. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "I think someone tried to raise me right, but it wasn't him. Not the man I thought. And now, I don't know who I am." She put a hand on his shoulder. "You're the one who's still here. Whoever left you in that car failed. You're not him. You're not part of his plan." Ben turned, eyes red. "Then what was his plan?" Canby paused. "Maybe to prove something. Maybe to destroy something. Maybe just to watch it all fall apart." "We don't know." Ben exhaled. "Then let's find out." The next day, a break. An FBI analyst traced a bank account under one of KS's aliases, Eric D. Lohan. Recent activity, small deposits. Withdrawals from a local ATM in Nalam. Security footage. Hooded man, mid-50s, mirrored sunglasses, gloves. The timestamp, 12 days ago. He was still out there. Ben watched the footage over and over, the posture, the gait. Then it hit him. The old VHS tape. He rushed to the station archive, pulled the family Halloween video from 1991. Aaron filming, Mark raking, 4-year-old Ben in a firefighter costume. And in the background, by the road, a man walking past. Mirrored sunglasses, same tilt, same posture. He'd been watching them even then. By the weekend, they had a plan. Stake the ATM, sweep surrounding parcels, monitor aerial maps, look for ground disturbance, hidden doors. And finally, something. A ranger near the eastern edge of Nalam State Park spotted a shallow depression in a pine grove, 30 feet wide, ringed with stones, too symmetrical. They dug. 3 feet down, they hit metal, a hatch, bolted from the inside. Ben stood as the welders went to work. The torch hissed. The metal groaned. And when the hatch opened, the smell hit first. Earth, rust, decay, but something more. They descended with flashlights and masks. A hallway, cement walls, scratches in the paint. A faint hum from an old generator. 6 rooms, 5 empty. The 6th, a cot, a desk, a woman, alive, eyes wide, cheeks sunken, pale as bone. She didn't scream, didn't speak, just blinked slowly. Ben dropped to his knees. "Mom!" She stared at him, stunned, as if he were a mirage, older, changed, but real. "Ben," she whispered. Her voice cracked like dry leaves. He nodded. "It's me." Her eyes flicked to his flashlight, to the agents behind him, then back. "Don't let them shut the door," she said, and collapsed. They medevaced her out at dawn. Malnourished, scarred, wrist and ankle damage from prolonged restraint. But she was alive. In the ICU, Ben sat beside her. Scrubs, visitor badge, her hand in his. She hadn't woken again, but she hadn't let go. The monitors beeped steady. She breathed steady, but her final words echoed in his head. "Don't let them shut the door." Not a door. The door. What door? And worse, had she watched the others go through it? By noon, she stabilized. At 1:04 p.m., her eyes opened again. Ben was there. She turned to him slowly, her lips parted, and with a hoarse whisper, she began to speak. Ben leaned forward, every nerve alert, as his mother, or the woman he hoped was, finally began to speak. "Did they find your father?" she asked. Ben's throat tightened. "No," he said gently. "We found his badge, and we think we know who did this." Her eyes welled with tears. "He's still out there." Ben nodded. "We know. We're going to find him, but I need to know everything. Please." She closed her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then softly, "I was drugged. Mark, too. He figured it out too late." "Figured what out?" "Garrett," she whispered. "He was already inside, working for the county, sometimes a clerk, sometimes a delivery driver. He even showed up at a training seminar once. I thought he was just some guy. But he'd been watching us for months." Ben remained silent, absorbing every word. "He wanted a family," she continued, voice trembling. "But one he could control, one he could build. He said the world had failed children, that Mark and I were already contaminated, but you, Ben, you could be different if raised the right way." Ben's voice cracked. "He left me in the cruiser," she nodded. "He told me he had to. Said the sheriff's office was too close, that if you stayed with us, you'd grow up broken, like everyone else." Her voice broke again. "He took me underground. Said he needed to finish the plan. He showed me the others. Some were already gone. He said they didn't pass the test. But you? He said you were special." Ben's hands curled into fists. "He wanted to raise me." Aaron nodded. "He wanted to replace your father, be your new one, and when you got older, he said he'd come back for you." Ben felt nauseous. "Did he ever say what the test was?" Her face twisted with pain. "He wanted to see if you'd come looking." Later that evening, Ben stood outside her hospital room, the weight of her words pressing down like a tidal wave. Garrett K.S. hadn't just stolen lives. He'd rehearsed them, manipulated them, built a distorted echo of family from lies and stolen memories. And Ben had always been a part of it. That night, Canby entered the task force war room with a file in hand. "DNA came back," she said. Ben looked up. "The woman we found isn't Aaron Teller." The room fell silent. "What?" he whispered. "She matches a different profile. A missing person from 1992. Name was Rachel Mendes. Disappeared from a rest stop. Never linked to your case." Ben blinked, stunned. "But she knew my name." "She did," Canby confirmed, "because someone taught her to." Ben sat down hard. "She thought she was my mother, or was made to think she was." "What about the journal? The message? The drawing?" Canby crouched beside him. "We think it's all part of the same sickness. KS built a world down there, a script, a manufactured reality, and now it's unraveling." Ben couldn't respond, because one horrifying truth had crystallized. Someone had spent years teaching Rachel Mendes to become Aaron Teller, and only one man could have done that. That night, rain tapped against the hospital window. Inside, the woman calling herself Aaron Teller sat up in bed. Her eyes locked onto the dark corner of the room. The shadows didn't move, but she spoke anyway. "He's going to come back," she whispered. "He always comes back." Ben didn't go home. He sat in the sheriff's conference room, lights dimmed, whiteboards covered in maps, dates, and photographs. A ghost story made tangible. "She's not my mother," he said again. "Not to anyone. Just the room." Canby paced, arms crossed. "We're not just dealing with an abductor," she said. "He doesn't just take people. He rewrites them, gives them new names, new memories, new lives." "Rachel wasn't just a prisoner," Ben muttered. "She was remade into Aaron Teller, and I was supposed to believe it. If you did, you passed. And if I didn't." She didn't answer. The next morning, the woman in the hospital spoke clearly. "My name is Aaron Teller," she said. Ben stood behind the glass, watching the psychiatric evaluation. "Can you tell me your husband's name?" the doctor asked. Mark Teller, deputy Tamaki County." "And your son?" Benjamin Elijah Teller." born September 10th, 1987. Ben's breath hitched. Every detail. Correct. How did you end up in that shelter? Her face faltered. We got a call. Stranded vehicle on County Road 19. We responded. We were ambushed. Do you remember who did it? She blinked. I don't know his name, but I remember the voice. He made me sing before meals. Happy family. Happy day. Ben stepped away. She's lying, he whispered. Canby shook her head. Not necessarily. What do you mean? She might believe it's all true, and some of it might be. Ben frowned. Explain. We ran facial recognition on known photos of Aaron Teller. Results came back inconclusive. What? The woman could be her. Bone structure, eyes, chin, all within expected deviation, but 30 years. Isolation, starvation, even surgical changes. Surgery? Canby nodded. We found faint incision scars, jawline, hairline, subtle but deliberate. Reinforcements to the illusion. Ben stared. So she might be Aaron, or someone made into her. Yes, and until we find KS, we won't know why. The next clue came from the handwriting analyst. The message, "He's not your father," was written by a left-handed adult male, he said. But the wall phrases, the affirmations, at least 3 different styles. 1 adult, 2 adolescents, 1 child. Ben's stomach turned. There were other kids down there. The analyst nodded. Maybe still are. The FBI reprioritized. A new task force, codenamed Chamber, launched a search for retrofitted fallout shelters, utility tunnels, hidden compartments across the Pacific Northwest. This wasn't about a missing couple anymore. This was a network, a blueprint for psychological control. And KS was still active. Ben returned to the shed one last time, the start of it all. He crouched by the foundation. A shimmer caught his eye. A cassette, unlabeled, wrapped in wax paper. Beneath it, a note in a child's handwriting. For Ben. In case he doesn't remember. His hands trembled. Back at the sheriff's AV room, the tape hissed to life. A child's voice. Faint, honest. I live underground now, but I think I used to live with a lady named Erin. She said my name was Eli. But the man says that's wrong. He says I was never supposed to be there. He says Ben is the one who gets to leave. Pause. He said I'm the rehearsal. The tape continued. Quiet. No background noise. I used to live in the other place, with sunlight, but I got sick. That's what he says. He says the outside made me sick, so he brought me here. But I remember Erin. She used to sing when she brushed my hair. Ben hit pause. Silence fell like a curtain. Canby whispered, Jesus. Ben's face was pale. There was another boy. Eli. Number, she said softly. That's what Rachel called him. But KS said it wasn't his name. Ben turned. What if Eli wasn't someone else? She frowned. What do you mean? He replayed the line. He says Ben is the one who gets to leave. Canby went still. Ben's voice trembled. I think I'm Eli. The revelation cracked through the task force like a thunderclap. Every record, every photograph, video, file was pulled. His birth certificate, school records, medical reports, all present, but too clean. No hospital history until age 6, no dental charts until his first foster intake. Ben stared at the documents. Had his entire life been curated, constructed? Had he ever really been Ben Teller? Or had he been Eli, rehearsed, rewritten, released? And if so, then what had the real Ben become? Ben leaned forward, every nerve alert, as the woman claiming to be his mother, someone he had once desperately hoped was, began to speak. Did they find your father? She asked, her voice thin but steady. Ben's throat tightened, the weight of a decade-old hope threatening to crush him. No, he said gently. We found his badge, and we think we know who did this. Her eyes welled with tears. He's still out there. Ben nodded, a quiet promise in his gaze. We know. We're going to find him. But I need to know everything, please. She closed her eyes, as if dragging the truth from the pit of some unreachable place. Then, softly, I was drugged. Mark II. He figured it out too late. Figured what out? Garrett, she whispered. He was already inside, working for the county. Sometimes a clerk, sometimes a delivery driver. He even showed up at a training seminar once. I thought he was just some guy. But he'd been watching us for months. Ben said nothing. The silence between them said more than words could. He wanted a family, she continued, voice trembling. But one he could control, one he could build. He said the world had failed children, that Mark and I were already contaminated. But you, Ben, you could be different if raised the right way. Ben's voice cracked. He left me in the cruiser. She nodded. He told me he had to. Said the sheriff's office was closing in, that if you stayed with us, you'd grow up broken, like everyone else. Her voice broke again. He took me underground, said he needed to finish the plan. He showed me the others. Some were already gone. He said they didn't pass the test, but he said you were special. Ben's fists clenched. He wanted to raise me. She nodded slowly. He wanted to replace your father, be your new one, and when you got older, he said he'd come back for you. Ben felt the bile rise in his throat. Did he ever say what the test was? Her face contorted with pain. He wanted to see if you'd come looking. Later that night, Ben stood outside her hospital room, his entire sense of self buckling under the weight of revelation. Garrett K.S. hadn't just abducted people. He'd reconstructed them, rehearsed roles, rewritten memories, and Ben had been at the center of it all. That night, Canby stepped into the war room, a new file in hand. DNA came back, she said, her voice somber. Ben looked up. The woman we found isn't Aaron Teller. The words hit like a thunderclap. What? Her profile matches someone else. A missing person from 1992. Rachel Mendes. Disappeared at a rest stop. Never linked to your case. Ben blinked. But she knew my name. She did, Canby replied. Because someone taught her to. Ben sat down heavily. She thought she was my mother, or was made to believe it. What about the journal? The drawing? The message? Canby crouched beside him. It's all part of the same sickness. K.S. built a script, a life, a play, and now it's falling apart. Ben couldn't answer, because one chilling reality emerged. Rachel hadn't been mistaken. She'd been groomed. For years, and only one man could have orchestrated that. That night, rain ticked softly against the hospital windows. Inside, Rachel Mendes, still clinging to the identity of Aaron Teller, sat up in bed, her eyes fixed on the far corner of the room. She spoke to the darkness. He's going to come back, she whispered. He always comes back? Ben didn't go home. He stayed in the sheriff's conference room, drowning in paper trails and broken truths. She's not my mother, he repeated. Not to anyone. Just himself. Canby paced, arms crossed. He doesn't just abduct. He rewrites, renames, reinvents. Rachel wasn't just a prisoner. She was remade. And you were meant to believe it. Ben whispered, if I believed it, I passed. And if you didn't, she didn't finish. The next morning, Rachel spoke again. My name is Aaron Teller. Ben watched through the glass as a trauma psychiatrist questioned her. Your husband's name? Mark Teller, Tammock County Deputy. And your son? Benjamin Elijah Teller, September 10th, 1987. Every answer matched. How did you end up in that shelter? Ambush. County Road 19, a call, a trap. Who did it? I don't know his name, but I remember his voice. He made me sing before meals. Happy family, happy day. Ben turned away. She's lying. Maybe not, Canby countered. She might believe it, and some of it might be true. How? We ran facial recognition, results inconclusive. Bone structure, eyes, chin, close enough, but scars, surgery, jawline, hairline. Someone might have altered her, reinforced the illusion. Ben's voice was hoarse. So she could be Aaron, or a woman transformed into her. Exactly. Until we find KS, we won't know why. The handwriting analyst dropped the next bombshell. The message on the floor, "He's not your father," was written by a left-handed adult male, but the affirmations on the walls, multiple sources, one adult, two teens, one child. Ben went pale. There were other children. Maybe still are. A new task force, codenamed Chamber, was launched. Retrofit shelters, decommissioned tunnels, hidden networks across the Northwest. This wasn't a case anymore. It was a system. Ben returned to the shed, the origin point. He crouched, found a glint. A tape, wrapped in wax paper. A note, for Ben, in case he doesn't remember. Back in the AV room, the tape played. A child's voice. "I live underground now. I think I used to live with a lady named Erin. She said my name was Eli, but the man says that's wrong. He says Ben is the one who gets to leave." Pause. "He said I'm the rehearsal." The voice was steady. Too steady. "I lived in the other place, Sunlight. I got sick, that's what he says. But I remember Erin. She sang while brushing my hair." Ben paused the tape. Silence thudded in the room. "There was another boy, Eli. She called him Number," Canby said. "But KS said that wasn't his name." Ben's voice cracked. "What if Eli wasn't someone else?" She froze. "What do you mean?" He replayed the line. "Ben is the one who gets to leave." "I think I'm Eli." The task force exploded into motion. Every childhood record, photo, file, scrutinized, too clean. No hospital visits before age 6. No dental records before foster care. A curated life. Had Ben ever truly been Ben Teller, or had he been Eli all along? And if so, then what became of the real Ben?